All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee of Douglas County Board of Commissioners to order. Today's date is Monday, February 19th, 2018. We do have a full agenda today. I'm going to try to stick to the plan here and keep it tight. To my right is Chairman Dr. Ramona Jackson-Jones. To my ultimate right is County Administrator Mark Till. We have across his Director Jennifer Hallman, Michelle Green, Manager of Financial Analyst. I always get her title wrong.
Financial analyst.
Yeah, Financial Analyst, Manager, just that person and stuff. We have Sabrina Codburn. I said it wrong. Sabrina Codburn, also an analyst.
Senior accountant.
Senior accountant. Okay, they are here. And we have some other guests that are here that we'll get to later. With that being said, as far as introduction is concerned, I'd like to go ahead and, if all of you have gotten a copy of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, I get a motion to approve.
Make a motion.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We're good. Okay. All right, so let's go right ahead. All right, Director Hallman, we got first up is, second up.
Is, we need to call for an executive session to discuss personnel.
Okay. We got a call for a question for going into executive session. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Can I get a second independent of me?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. All right. We've now come officially out of executive session. I have a motion to come into regular session now. Make a motion.
Make a motion.
Second. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're back into the regular session of the Finance Committee. We're going to continue on this path here. We have an agenda item. Director Hallman, you want to set us up? We want to talk about what has been presenting to us an internal audit report. Take it from there.
Absolutely. We performed an internal audit report. Specifically, Sabrina Cochran in my office, our senior accountant, was asked to review the coroner's deputy invoices, whether they be investigation or transport. And if there was any questions or anything that she needed clarity on, to write those instances down and ask the coroner for some explanations. So I'll kind of let her kind of give you the brief overview of that, and this hopefully will be the report that comes full circle. The request has been made, the summary or the audit has been performed, and now these are just closing remarks.
I have not seen a copy of this, so this is our first official presentment to the committee. All right, so go ahead. I won't read, I'll listen.
So like Jennifer said, the board had asked us to kind of review all the invoices. They didn't want us sampling, just looking at every single one. So we pulled every invoice from January through October for all of her deputy coroners. And then we compared that with death certificates we received in probate to just review for any discrepancies or make sure everything, matched the invoices. And in doing that, there was only 3 things that we had questions for the coroner from. One of them was death certificates that were marked no under a section of the death certificate, and in referring to, if it was referred to a medical examiner, were still being invoiced to the county. And in that, the coroner's response was that they don't fill out that portion. They only have to do the medical portion, and she wasn't sure what that even meant. And then on the second one, on where it's pronounced or certified the death certificates, there's a section where one of the coroners has to be the one to certify it. And in ones that her deputy coroners were completing and invoicing us for, the coroner herself was certifying these, and we had asked questions about that. And she had said that on those, Mike actually didn't have the ability to sign off with him on his ID number in the system, but that's now been corrected. And so anyone in the office that's sworn off, they can now certify those death certificates going forward. So that's kind of why it looked misleading on some of them, but that's been corrected. And then on the last instance was the county was being invoiced for investigations that deaths didn't occur within the county per the death certificate. And the coroner had explained that in circumstances where a death occurred outside the county, if they're transferred to another hospital without the county, if the original occurrence happened within the county, it was still invoiced back to Douglas County. So if somebody had accident in Douglas County but was taken to Tanner and Carroll, we're still responsible after the fact. So that's why it looks misleading again on those death certificates. And those were the only 3 instances we found.
So, and again, we'll take I'll take a look at this, review this. Jennifer, is this your official final draft for your office on this matter?
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I'll make a recommendation that we can at least acknowledge that we've received this report and review it. Is there any comments that you'd like to give, or County Administrator?
I don't really have a lot of comments, but I do just have one to say that I appreciate your due diligence with investigating those 3 concerns, and then also I'm satisfied with the response from the coroner, and I'm glad she had some legitimate answers and have made some resolutions in my office to make sure going forward, particularly with the certified, with the death certificate, now all anyone in our office that is sworn and sign off on the certificate, so that really, I call it the level of the playing field in our particular office. So that's other than that, thank you so much for your time and due diligence.
I will give any comments since I've had a chance to look at it, but I'm fine as is, and it be acknowledged for the record that we have received this, Madam Michelle. All right.
Thank you, Sabrina. I'm gonna let Sabrina,
Yes.
excuse Sabrina, she's working on your end, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yep,
Thank
no,
you,
thank you
Sabrina.
for that work. Thank you. All right. With that being said, let's move on to our next item. Director Hallman, final draft of the long-term capital plan.
Yes, we have David Corbin and Matthew Arrington with us today with Terminus.
Yes.
And we all 3 been working on this financial model that we'll be presenting in just a little bit, as well as what I call the 100-page book document that's got good historical data that's already been presented to the board as just kind of a preliminary review of what we've been working on. But it also has a credit score cards from rating agencies regarding Douglas County. It has comparisons from not just metro area counties, but counties that are very similar to us that may not necessarily be metro. So I'll kind of, before we get into the model, do you all want to do the book first and then the
Yeah, I
model?
think, that would be great. I
Okay.
think the model may be a little more detailed. I know Matthew has another
Sure.
appointment he has to run to, and I'll turn it over to him in a second. Part of our context was, to give everyone context, was to, we got into it, we started off on one path, and just like we always know, it always developed into something else. So part of this discussion is, yes, to get to a long-term capital model, but it's also to talk about your historical financial picture. There was some preliminary work that had to be done to get to that point, which was, where have you been? To know where you're going, we have to figure out where you've been and why you got there, and then start to develop the tools necessary to do that. Matthew, in this book, and I asked him for effect to come in and just kind of slam it down, sort of like they do on Law and Order, just the 100-pound book. It's a lot of paper, a lot of trees we cut down today, but we're going to go through this book in terms of just the general things that we identified, things that we're going to recommend that will facilitate them going into that model. So, Matthew.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As Dave said, what I did is I printed out 3 copies of the book. I will give you as many as you want, but I didn't know if people prefer them electronically, so I will give you an electronic version if you just want to email it. But if you want hard copies for the commissioners, we would definitely print more. But those are 3 of them. So as David said,
Probably for the final version that we'll present on in March, we'll do copies for, I'll
That's
tell you
fine.
how many copies, hard copies.
just let me know. But they're 3 to
Yeah,
kind
for
of
just
get
for the
you,
draft, this will be fine.
3 to get you started. But as I said, what's in here is just a kind of an overview of the county, nothing that you don't already know, and there's a review of the financial and operating performance of the past 5 to 6 years, which we presented, as well as the credit rating information. We got information, as Jim said, from the rating agencies,
Yep.
and we got information from 2 of the local underwriters, being Citi and Stevens, to kind of say, look, tell us what the people on your desk are saying. So basically, this is how they look at Douglas County.
Yeah.
This is how their investors look at Douglas County. So those reports are in there. I do want to acknowledge them. I just reached out to them and say, independently, can you do me a solid? Tell me what you guys are seeing. So those 4 reports are included in the appendix as well. The county comparisons, what I just want to say about that is I did not want to give you a whole bunch of information on people who are not Douglas County. What we want to do is just tell you that as a commissioner, if there's some high-level idea of something you're doing, here are some people you can look at, and you let us know as your financial advisor, hey, give me more information on making their consolidation. I may want to pitch that idea that we consolidate with Douglasville. So I want more detailed information. But I didn't want to assume that you wanted it, so I didn't want to give it all to you. But I've given you 5 or 6 different counties and kind of what they're doing that's a little different. So as you go through it, you may say, send me more detailed information, or how is that working? I mean, we get the same thing. For instance, one of your cities, everybody's asking us now, send us the copy of the blight policy that Powder Springs is doing. Everybody thought that was a great idea, so people are asking us for that. So I'll pass that on to you to let us know anything you want. What I would like to go to today is I pulled out pages on the policy review section and recommendations. These are the things that I want to talk about today. Let me just say, as we said in the last meeting, this is us really being nitpicky. We reviewed your financial policies. Jennifer did give us a copy of this. We reviewed them, and the first 3 things we look at, you guys already had them. So it was really nothing to point out. You had a fund balance policy, which, believe it or not, a lot of counties do not have, and those that do have it, they don't follow it. Your fund balance policy is 10% of your general fund, which is about 45 days, which is where we want to see people do. What I will say with that one, though, is as you build up your reserves, once you probably get to that 60-day mark, if you get to that 60-day mark and you feel like you're operating comfortable, we will then probably say, let's pass a policy, but I don't want you to put a policy and then have to climb to get there. Let's see if you can get there and you can operate for a year or 2 around 60. If so, we'll pass a policy. You'll get some marks with that. So, but
Before you, Matthew, if you could reference sort of some of this evolved out of the context of the rating agency.
yeah, right.
meeting. Yeah, you want to bring that up in terms of what came out of that?
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to that one. So the first one that we're talking about here is I just say that the county utilizes SPLOST in place of a formal annual capital budget that is at least 5 years in length and updated annually. The county does have an annual capital outlay, but the funding is subject to availability. If you remember, when we went to the rating agencies, even though you guys have SPLOST and you present kind of an annual capital budget, they like to see cities and counties have kind of a 5-year rolling capital budget that you update every year.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to do it, but they just want to know that you're thinking about this stuff, because what happens is if you look at one particular year and they say, well, gosh, you're planning on spending $300 million 3 years from now, tell me how you're going to get there. So you just want to show them that you're already thinking about it. And obviously with you guys, most of it is always spent with SPLOST money. One thing that I am definitely getting into here, and you have a copy in the very back in the appendix, is kind of a copy of a CIP program and kind of how you put one in together, what you're thinking about. I mean, you guys already do it, you just don't do it for 5 years. So the only thing we're saying, and again, this is just being nitpicky, is instead of it being 1 year, just kind of do a 5-year rolling plan. Mark really already had one when it came to SPLOST. He said exactly when they're going to buy fire trucks, when the money is going to come from PAYGO and bond money. He has one, so I mean that's really it. I mean all you got to do is just slap capital 5-year plan on that, and you kind of already across there.
Let me make 2 comments to that point. 5-year plan, I get. This didn't come out of Wall Street, but one of the things sometimes we hear, and it may be more of a political, so this is all amongst us from a financial, we'll put politics aside for example, is that sometimes we get legal counsel that says we cannot commit to something that may obligate the committee, future administrations to a decision today, right? We hear this little narrative. But what we're trying to acknowledge is that there is a desire, or there is purpose behind planning, right? And it's not obligation, it is not encumbering. It just simply says that we're laying out, potentially recognizing that the next administration and the next set of leaders may change those priorities. I think some kind of way we're trying to make sure that any decision that we may commit to today, as far as Mark putting, your longevity, you'll be having this list of things that may come from 2 or 3 different administrations, that it's fluid, right? Is that, I want to make sure that we're saying the same thing.
We are. It's, the whole point is, it's a capital planning tool that once done on an annual basis, you will adopt, but doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna fund anything. It'll provide you with the ability to say, we may, we're gonna start, we may want this initiative. How are we gonna pay for it? How are we gonna, again, it's a planning tool. It's nothing more than that. nothing's encumbered until you put money to it, right? There's no encumbrance there, it's just, it's a, you know, people, in terms of good governance, good fiscal control,
Right.
it's an ability to, it forces you to think about what your priorities are. You just, quite honestly, the last couple of months, and probably longer than that, you went through it with some capital planning on replacement of, you know, HVAC and equipment and energy savings. That's part of the capital outlay. That can't be, you know, you can be reactionary or you can
Right.
plan it. Right? And that's part of what this process is about. Acknowledging that there's a capital outlay process
Yeah.
and that you have initiatives that you want to accomplish over a period of time. So are you going to think about them or are you going to wait until they come up and then address them?
Which is more, Madam Chair, this is, Jack, it's a commissioner approach, and it's really leadership style. There's a leadership style that says, well, I'd rather not say anything until the very last minute. And there's a leadership style that says, I'm gonna put it on the table, whatever comes of it comes of it. There's a difference, and so historically, we just sort of, we dealt with the capital outlay based in the year that we were in. It just depends on, if it broke down, we'd fix it. I think what we're seeing now is that, based on your priority of transparency is our in long-term capital planning is that we're trying to, we know we're gonna have to replace certain things. We know we're just there's just no way you can get around not knowing these things. So let's just go ahead and plan it, recognizing you're not committing. And I think that's sometimes you may get from the administration that, oh my God, we're committing to this. And I think we're just saying we're planning it.
Good plan.
It's not committing, it's planning it. We're putting it on the table, but we move around year to year, depends on what's happening. I think that's, we've never done this before. So you're highlighting something that we've acknowledged it, and yes, you have certain officials who do a good job of managing their own area, but from a comprehensive perspective, we've never done this. So this tool will allow us now to officially get it on the list, on some type of list, holistically. And what I'm hearing you is that there's an adoptive process every year, that we're just adopting that this is the current list, but it's not an obligation of financial.
Correct.
I want her to,
Does not
Yes,
obligate
correct.
okay, okay, I mean,
No obligation. The only obligations you're saying is that to the public and to the people that are looking, is that whatever's on that list we thought was a priority enough to begin discussions about how to get it taken care of. When and if you decide that you want to, that you want to do.
all right, so that's just even different. There's something that says it's comprehensive, which is exhaustively everything, versus something that you just said was something that's a priority in the immediate.
Well, I mean, again.
Let me give you an example. Today, is it tomorrow, we're having a public hearing. Waste management, is that it? Or we already had that one?
No, it's not a public hearing.
All
Had a public hearing on the ordinance
All
change.
right, so, no, but go back to, we're talking about Republic, right?
Mhm.
And that triggered this whole conversation this morning regarding landfill. To do or not do, to buy a new landfill, 30-year process, this will go through government and so forth. I've seen some price tags of somewhere between 27 and 40 million. I don't know what the number is. That need to be on the list, seeing that we may run out in what, 5, 7 years, 3, 7 years, give or take.
I would advise that you put that on your list.
Right. So it's not obligating that that we gotta go spend 27 million, or that if we ever do a future supplemental SPOS, that would even be part of that, but we need to get that on the list, because that's real.
Yeah,
Yes?
it's real. So it's what you perceive, you know, again,
Yes.
you own the house, sooner or later you're gonna replace your water heater. You own the house, you need insurance, you own the house, there's certain things that come along. We may not have to fund the water heater this year, you know, but it nevertheless, we acknowledge that there are certain obligations and things that we'd like to pursue, even down to, I mean, I'm just giving it to you, my own house. We'd like to have a vacation, so that's a process, right? That's, you know, let's get it on the list. Again, I think it's important, and that's what the rating agencies were saying.
Okay.
Most places don't put things on lists, they wait until they happen, and then we try to figure out how to get it funded. Part of it is, one half of that responsibility is getting it on the list. 2 is coming up with an adequate mechanism in which to meet the funding obligation in that period that you want it or over time.
All right,
All right,
please.
I'm gonna skip over
Yeah,
the
keep
next one
going.
because it would lead into, the financial models. Let's go to page 56, and this finding that we found was that the county does not have a policy to direct excess fund balance, and if you remember again, this is a thing at the rating agencies where basically, if I remember correctly, you guys had excess fund balance that year, which is a good thing, and you decided that you wanted to just take about, I think, like 4.5 million or 2.5 to pay for an animal shelter.
Yep.
That was a good thing. The only issue, and just so you can understand why the rating agencies look at that as a bad thing, is what if it would have been 10 million? What if it been 15 million? You don't have a policy that really guided that decision, and it was a good decision, but they want to see you have a policy. So what we're recommending here is that you need a policy that establishes that, you know, some percentage, 50 to 100% of those funds are, that are in excess of fund balance. So once you've kind of hit your number there with your 10%, we would put those into a newly formed capital fund. The reason we think you need to have this capital fund is because of a couple of things. One, you are dependent on all your capital needs from SPLOST. You have no backup plan if voters don't pass SPLOST. So that gives you a little cushion there. Assuming that, I mean, we know that, you know, that vote has been getting tighter and tighter in every county every year. I mean, it used to be a windfall, but now it's been 60-40 in some places, and it's getting closer. So that's one thing it does. The second thing it does is, I have a client who is wanting to do some capital projects, but it does not fit the definition of SPLOST because it involves blight, but it involves land that the county doesn't own. They cannot use SPLOST funds for that by definition. So having your own capital fund allows you to do other things that you may not do. Having a capital fund also, as I alluded to earlier, Mark already has a plan for everything that he plans on spending. What happens if the fire chief calls you today and says, "Hey, I need a new pumper truck"? You either have to change your SPLOST thing or you have to come out of general fund. This will allow you to have like a little rainy day fund to bring those things on. So what I said here is, you know, if you have it and you build it up, it will allow you to complete more projects, obviously. It will allow you to, you know, if you build this fund up, you can do more pay-go, and you probably won't have to borrow or do bond issues next time, or, you know, years from now, because you have 20 million kind of sitting in the bank that you can use as your pay-go. Or you can just redirect, you know, capital funds to handle projects that don't qualify for SPLOST, like I just mentioned. So that is kind of the reason of doing it. We didn't, you know, really have a recommendation for what percentage. I think you kind of have to figure out to say, hey, look, you know, at least, we say at least 50%. So if at the end of the year you have excess fund balance of 6 million, we think you should at least commit half of that to going into the fund. You may say 75%, 80%, whatever. I would set it low. That way you give yourself the wiggle room to do 100% if you want to in any given year. But every year is going to be unique. So if you just say 50%, that other 50% you can kind of decide on a year-by-year basis what you want to do. But you kind of put that there and let it build up. I wouldn't really plan on spending it, but it gives you cushion. In effect, just think of if sales tax collect just on SPLOST. We budgeted very conservative on collections. So I think we'll be good here. But just imagine if sales tax are worse than what we thought. We then have to not do some SPLOST projects. Well, you can say, well, we're going to be short 4 million. Let's get it from this fund. So just having this gives you a lot of cushion to do a lot of different things. So that's why we recommend that one. So
While you're on that point, this point should go hand in hand with the capital planning, right? No sense of saying we're gonna put money away for capital outlay. We're gonna put excess fund balance away for capital outlay when you don't have a capital outlay plan,
That's it.
right? I mean, I think they should go hand in hand, right? Don't, what are we saving money for?
So it's a strategic opportunity. In other words, it's tied to something.
Tie it to something. Doesn't mean you're obligated again to spend it in there. I mean, but what it says is, we're planning our expense side, but we're also thinking about planning the funding side of that as well, over a period of
Because
time.
like you said, you can't always expect to have SPLOST.
Yes, that's correct.
Or it is, and people do vote, sometimes people do vote things, don't vote for them,
That's right.
then what?
You bring up a good point in this director of finance, and this, if I think about, I'm going to use the two SPLOST per se, or just in general, these two transactions. The jail, we bought land for the jail. We had about $18 million in our general fund reserve, and we spent about 9.8 or $9 million. Took us to single digits when we went into the recession. Oops.
Plus we had the flood.
Yeah, and it flooded on 09 when I first came on board. So you had flood and all this, so oops, right, it was tight, right? So we spent almost half. That was, it just took us to single just half, and then we got nothing to back us up. Then to your point, when, obviously we know what happened in 2013, gave us some cushion, now you got some cash, we took 5. Because we, you know, we gave it back, we had 5 in cash, right? That took us down. All right, so we got these 2 cases, we're doing these large transactions based on opportunity of the moment, right? We hadn't done the splosh yet for the jail yet, we're gonna buy this land. Took half the general fund, reserve, made this land purchase. Same thing with the animal shelter, we had way more cushion per se, but it was a big chunk. So the question is, I heard you say a certain, is there some type of rule that, is there a policy that board of commissioners will not spend above? I mean, I'm trying to get away from, these are big chunks, and I get that they're the priority of the moment. I have no problem, it's probably it's a board of commissioner topic, but I'm just looking for some guidance on this, because it's like, I would have supported taking half the money for that land transaction back then, but I was okay with the $5 million on the, because we have enough cash in there. So is there like a rule that says on any one thing? I'm trying to get my mind around this one.
You know, the way that we've dealt with that is you do have a fund balance policy, right? That for your undesignated fund balance, right? And then you know, if you create anything above that, you go into capital outlay. You know, the question is if it's $9 million, right, in that case, that would probably have taken you underneath your policy, right? So implicitly, when I look at all your numbers over time, having that 10% minimum requirement, I think did that $9 million purchase take you under that 10% for a period of time?
I think it was right at, I don't know if it took us
Yeah.
below, but yeah, if it did, it was a couple of percentage points.
Yeah, so I think the answer to your question is putting the plan together, adopting, or at least adopting what happens to excess fund balance going into capital outlay. But then simply saying that if there's a project that's over X number of dollars, it's gotta be tagged to something, right? You've gotta have in other words, you're not gonna spend $9 million, not knowing whether or not the SPOS is gonna pass, right? There's gotta be, there's gotta be something that's tied to, you know, if it's under $5 million and it's in the one, it's gotta be in the capital budget plan. 2, there's a set, we can probably come up with a set of criteria that will not put you in a box too much, but the question is, it's sort of like if I give a budget cut, how do I pay for the budget cut within a 3-year period, right? You know, how do we, so if I purchase a piece of land for a project, what's my proof, in order, if it's over $5 million or over some dollar amount, you gotta prove to the board that how it's gonna be funded strategically over the period of time, right? We could probably come up with a couple of triggers that will allow you to at least create a framework for you to do that, right? So if you spend money on something, I need to know how you're gonna pay for it over a period of time,
Okay.
right? Maybe that's 5 years, maybe that's 3. In this case, you were using 5 with the SPOS, assuming that worked.
I think I got it.
Yeah. I just have to think about, and I wish I had it all, I have to think about what that framework looks like, but to me, it would be, 1, it's in the plan. 2, if it's over a dollar threshold, it has to be repaid back within a period of time that has to be identified.
So the plan is based, there's the plan that is administrative, that is, you're collecting stuff that we know we need to do over time that's been identified. There's an annual process that we recalibrate this plan based on priorities of the moment. And then there's a 3rd layer, which is the funding at any given moment on whether or not we actually take action. Did I do that right?
That's correct.
All right. That being said, so Director Hallman, when I think about the capital transportation fund, I'm using that as a framework. We've set aside a certain amount of money over time, and this is reserved for the sake of the conversation. But within that bucket, there were some projects that were identified already, and then there's some discretionary. Am I saying that right?
That is correct.
You have something that's been designated as projects on the list, pending funding. They could be partial funding, meaning we've got a grant, waiting to pick up our match, do our local match, or vice versa, we got a local match, we ain't got the grant yet. Depends on what it is. And so, what we're saying is take that type of approach and apply it to a broader, is that what I'm hearing, as far as this,
That's exactly right.
okay, as a model?
That's the model.
Recognizing they're gonna put more criteria, you guys will put more criteria on it. Madam Chair, you see?
I mean, it's all connected. That's the fallacy, is when you don't plan and it comes at the moment, you don't have the ability to connect the dots, because there's just not enough time. So what I'm, right, so what I'm suggesting is that the policy and the plan now make everything connected, that there's a process that makes you think about what you're gonna do, how it's gonna be funded, and whether or not you gave it any thought.
Yes.
So my fuel pumps go out, I'm just making it up, just say it's $500,000, and it wasn't on the list. But we need those fuel pumps, and so that now we're reacting, we gotta do the fuel pumps, that means that something else got sacrificed, because it wasn't. So, yeah, we're
There's
trying
stuff
to-
like that's gonna happen. I mean, fuel pumps and, rotors on my car,
Yep,
so, some stuff.
right. Some things we can't anticipate, so we're trying to smooth out the decision making. In other words, we know
But,
it's
but
in
I would hope at the departmental level, at some point, I'm sure, Mark, y'all do this, is that, they sit down with you every year and say, here, we've kind of looked at what's going on in our capital facilities.
You're still in my thunder,
Huh?
You're still in my thunder, that's my next.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead, go
so,
ahead, go
so,
ahead.
so the last one on it's number page 55 is a good one, because obviously you did not have a 10-year or long-term capital plan. But as David and Jennifer will present in a minute, we'll show you what was developed. If you allow me, what we wanted to do is to say, well, what are we going to be looking at? So what we did is identify those categories that we will be making assumptions on, and where do we get the information from? So basically, we're saying that this model should be updated every 2 to 5 years. The model should show future revenues and expenditures in a consolidated forecast with additional detailed forecasts of revenue streams. So the thing that you definitely have to forecast is revenue. So we're saying that the model should utilize national trends to forecast property tax and sales growth. We can't just pull a number out of the sky and say we want to use it. We actually have an economist that we're partnering with who will come in and talk to you a little bit more about revenue and how you should do that at a future date. But the second thing we should also do is personnel. So where you start with this is very simple. You just send out a questionnaire to department heads, and you basically look, as much as you really know, and this is what Dave was saying, tell me what your needs are as far as head count for the next 5 to 10 years. The police would obviously consider, crime statistics and kind of new technologies and things of that nature. The firefighters will obviously think of when things are coming online. Obviously, when you have big kind of employers in town, there are certain kind of fire trucks you have to have in different levels and stuff like that. So what you want to do is tell them, tell me, what's your plan to either expand or consolidate. That way you kind of know everything, because as the firefighters and police grow, you're going to need more buildings, more precincts, more fire stations. You're going to need more fire cars, more fire trucks, more equipment. That's going to affect your health care. That's going to affect your pension. So that's why you find out now, so you know when those big hits are coming. So that's category 2. Category 3 is a maintenance asset replacement category. And basically, this is no more than just your 5-year capital budget, what we already talked about, but it will be included in there. Item 4 is the infrastructure maintenance category, and this is future maintenance required on existing infrastructure assets such as traffic signals, sidewalk, street paving. These are most of the things that will fall up under SPLOST for the most part. And then the last one is what we call the infrastructure investment category, and these are going to be those large dollar projects that's funded through debt. So obviously that would be like if you're going to do a big jail, or if you're going to do a big subdivision, and it's going to require a lot of new streets and things of that nature. These are just those real big projects that's going to have at least a 20 to 30 year life cycle on them. Like this building would fall upon that category when you built it. So you go ahead and figure in at some point you would have to probably replace this building. So maybe whenever you do one of these 15, 20 years from now, you would probably put a new one of these on that list. But it just gives you a forecast of looking at everything real big picture, so that you don't really get hit with $500 million worth of things in 1 year. You can kind of say, well, let's shift some things around so we can do this. So that is what the financial model will show, and you know, I guess they will give you the details of it, but this is kind of the layout of how we got to that model.
No, and I get it, so these like, fixed defined fields in the model, and then there's, I guess, so maybe user defined allows us, it's, I mean, you're saying these are static across all, if we're looking at comparisons across all other counties, this is sort of the standard type of things that you look at, this is how you label them, that one here. Okay, so then I said for personnel, for example, and again, this is a transition for us as a county, and even talking like this, so some of it is language, which is why you're asking, pushing back, which is, okay, well, we've got a fire station, and we've got a community center, and we've got a senior center that's gonna be coming online. That's part of what's lost. Part of the language and the reality is that, ooh, there's personnel to go in there, right? Okay, well, we know this, right? There's no way around it, but yet we don't have it listed anywhere. It's sort of like a quiet, and that's the part of transparency I think that this administration acknowledges, which is, we need this data, because there's no way, what you don't want to do is react to show up, oh my God, the chief needs how many? 28 people? Is that how many people are going to a fire station?
Well, after you built the building.
After you build the building, which is something that you can anticipate,
Right.
like, and that's the whole, it's the forced discipline of like, come on, guys, let's get our minds around it. The community understands, they voted for this, they understand this, we gotta be, there's that transparency where you sort of, you're like this sort of kind of, you're showing them a little bit, you ain't showing them the whole hand, it's like, just tell them the truth. Just show it so that we can make a collective decision. I think that's the whole premise when we all went to, this group, we pretty much went to New York, and we came back, and it was like, we got it, right? And it's that this was the challenge they put on the table, like, all right, y'all doing good, just okay, now we're gonna take you out to a whole other level. And that is what this is supposed to be about, to make sure we get our minds around it. We can't do this without the tool. And so I don't want to belabor that point, but I had to bring out that that's what I want to get at. I want to be able to lay this out in a way that allows us to run some scenarios that we can make some real decisions, because it's,
Well,
the math will tell the
you're
truth.
correct, you're correct, Commissioner, and again, part of what we see all the time is, again, we've got a client that his population is growing. They need to have a fire station, but they don't want to commit to putting the people in it, or they don't want to tell folks that you're gonna have to put, so part of the model that we'll get into shortly provides you with the flexibility to say, okay, we've got a capital outlay, but we also have an ongoing, what I call the carry cost, right? That has to be acknowledged. Now, the funny thing is about property taxes, and again, I'm, as your advisor, and I tell everybody the same thing. You buy a car, you got insurance, gas, maintenance, all the things that go with it, and that needs to be incorporated into the budgets going forward, right? You can't just, you know, SPLOST may have built it, but the SPLOST monies aren't there in perpetuity to continue to pay for the operating side of that, right? It has to be built into the budget process going forward. And, you know, that's sort of what this is all about.
Okay? Anything else before we get into, I know you had to depart. and I'm
No,
sorry
I got a
about
couple
that.
minutes, but no, that's fine. That's really it. I guess they will kind of go into showing you kind of how it works now. We just wanted to define those categories of, you know, what things we're doing up there, and we want to talk about where we're getting the data from. So on the personnel stuff, we think you ought to use your people. Let's not use a national trend on what firefighters are doing. I mean, that's not realistic. Talk to your fire chief, tell him to give you a 5 or 10 year budget, because he knows the area, he knows his needs. We can't just assume that Douglas County is gonna do what the national people are doing. So, you know, and the other thing we did under personnel is that at least every 5 to 10 years, you need to do a pay study. You need to figure out where you guys are, because obviously that's something else you have to do. At some point, you're gonna have to give raises, or you're gonna have to make changes to your pension and things of that nature. So we think that those should be done every 5 to 10 years, and that should be a part of, you know, kind of the personnel stuff.
So the last time you presented formally to the full Board of Commissioners, we talked about the expense side. Now we're gonna sort of speak to the broader model and make sure that we talk about the revenue. Is that correct? I just want to bring it full circle, because that was sort of the scope of work.
All about the revenues.
Yeah, it was two parts of the expectations on statement of work of the Board of Commissioners when we engaged you guys, which is to help us solve long-term capital policy, which we just spoke to, and a model. And some of our commissioners were expecting that whatever deliverable, we could see it, we could touch it. So we're just trying to bring it full circle for the statement of work. So I want to yield to that and keep it going, if that's
Sure.
okay.
I've got it on flash drive. I don't
That's
know
fine.
if it will be better to look at hard copies. as well. I have it on legal, so it's a lot easier to read. You know it in your
You
head,
know
right?
what, the beauty about that, listen, if, I'm gonna be honest with you, if we've done what we were supposed to do for y'all, Jennifer and Michelle and the staff, you know it as well as I do at this point. And, you know, I'm here to supplement whatever you want, we're gonna go through here, just to show you how it works, but to give you some context, what Jennifer's about to put it on the,
Mark, I might need your help.
Yeah, put on the flash. Yeah.
on the board. You know, this is what I talk about, to kind of know where you wanna go. You have to go back to where you've been, and in this book here, in this 100-page book, you wanna call it that, there's, you know, years and years of data that we processed, and simulated and looked at, and to give you a perspective of where you can go with this thing, in terms of what's really there, what's not there.
Mhm.
And part of this is, what you're gonna see is this model ultimately provides you with the ability to, you have to make some assumptions, but, to hardwire your, base model of expenses,
Yes.
allow you to change those variables and growth of those expenses or lack thereof. All of it tell you that, hey, if we agree that these are the capital items, these are the operational needs, it produces a number. And then that number then to figure out is where are you gonna derive that number from? Right, and that's what we're gonna go, so it's expenses into revenues, and then revenues into the source of those revenues and what impact they have on fund balance going forward. Get it?
Why-
Got to get one of these.
Well, that's fine, while they're working on that. So, back to your point about assumptions. Again, this model is a tool. It's a electronic tool that finance uses, almost like our budgeting process or
Correct.
whatever. It's just a tool. I'm sure there's the algorithm behind it, the model, the formulas can get off. And so I'm trusting that this is, in other words, I'll go in here and put a negative number in here, and I'm sure, I'll stress test it,
Yeah.
but that being said, I'm making sure that they're comfortable, meaning finance understands how this works. Is there any?
Well, that's why I'm hoping that in the next 5 or 10 minutes here, that, we've stress tested it, we've worked it out, that the staff particularly can tell you exactly how it works and why it works, and for them, and, because I'm curious, as like I said, 'cause sometimes we sit in a bubble, and we develop things that we think will work, and
Right.
in fact, we can talk about what we did here.
Okay.
Okay, y'all ready?
Yes, please.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Okay, I really didn't listen to what David was saying, I'm working on this, so if
That's
I'm
all
repeating
good.
myself, let me know. What we did is, like I said, this is gonna be an ever-evolving, changing model that we're gonna have. But David and I worked several hours together, in person and over the phone to, no pictures,
Mhm.
to get this, done. What I did add an extra spreadsheet, David, just because I
Right.
wanted to show, where I came up with some of my assumptions. The first sheet that you have is showing since SDS, because the numbers would get skewed prior to 2015 with public safety, because we had fire and EMS,
Yeah.
all the development services in the general fund.
So let me, just on that point there,
Mhm.
we gave you what's in your book, an actual 10-year, I think we went back to 2009.
9.
You know, and so we actually went back to 2009 to come up with the model originally.
Okay.
And so to make it, again, Jennifer made the adjustments to say, let's start off from 15 going forward, what those looks like, but look what it looks like. But you do have the data in this
We do have
book
the
back
full-
to 2009.
Yeah, 2000.
Yes.
Okay.
We have all the way to 2009, but I wanted to start with
Makes sense.
SDS.
All right.
So we just have the revenue categories up here: general property tax, loss, motor vehicle, mobile home, other taxes, and then other general fund revenues. Then we have the functions down here: general government, judicial, public safety, public works, parks and rec, planning and community development, health and welfare. So service delivery started in 2015, so I just did the actual 2015, what percentage of each of these categories made up the total. For 2016, 2017 is still preliminary because we have not closed 2017 yet, but they're gonna be pretty close to these numbers. We still got another, 2 weeks, I think. Then budget 2018. Then I did the average trend to see, if you look right here, you can see general property taxes, about 49% of your revenue, your local option sales tax is around 19%, motor vehicle, mobile home is around 6%, other tax revenue is 5%, and then all your other general fund revenues are 22%. The general government, on the expenditure side, is around 27%, judicial is around 17%, public safety, 38%. And again, that's why you see 38, you're used to seeing, prior to SDS, you're used to seeing around 50% because it included the fire and EMS. This is just looking at general fund. 6% for public works, 7% for parks and recreation, 3% for planning and community development, and 2% for health and welfare. So, this is cool, I like it, if I can just get it to come down.
I'll tell you, this would be dangerous if I had one of these things.
Okay, all right, so, what we did first was have the projected recurring expenditure, up here. Currently in the model, we don't have anything password protected, locked, or anything, because we're still working on it, but once we have it, I don't want to say it's finalized, because it's always going to be a work in progress, but we're going to add more tweaks to this as we go along. But just for the sake of looking at the screen, anything that you can have input in, of course it has input, anything that's referenced has REF, anything that has calculation means that the Excel calculates itself, or there's a formula in there. So what we did up here is said, okay, you have your general government, judicial, public safety, public works, parks, planning, and health. You have all of those functions that I started with 2019, that you can put in growth rates for each of those functions. They can be identical for every year. They can, whatever you think each of those functions are going to experience for a 10-year period. I use the base year as 2018 for the budget year. And so what this does is this feeds off for 2019, takes the base year and whatever you put up here on these projected recurring revenues. And I showed it going both ways, a positive, and then in 2022, I have it as a negative, just so you can see that you can work with it up or down, neutral, zero. So that's how it projects your expenditures. You put your growth rates on what you expect. Down here, as David had mentioned, and this is something I think we're going to see more additions to as we kind of, or when I say additions, probably more detail. Like we may have capital investments and asset replacement as a general category, but we may want to say, hey, we want to highlight cars specifically, so we want to pull that out as a separate line item instead of asset replacement.
So user defined?
These are user defined.
Yep.
And you put amounts here, and it will, with the corresponding year, and then it will give you what your total annual expenditures are.
And part of this exercise is, we pretty much know most of this. This is really operating. What we don't know sometimes, because you have, other than when you plan to do it like now, is it gives you the ability to say, okay, how much are we going to put in for capital outlay for the next 5 years? What's your plan say right now? How much are we going to put in for, are we going to add something to fund balance? You got some places, all this is to acknowledge that in a particular year with certain growth assumptions, based on some base year and some non-recurring expenditures, how do we come, what's the revenue number that you really need to come up with for that particular year? Whatever that may be, this number could be, if you told me you were going to put $2.5 million in here for asset replacement, that number really needs to be, roughly 90 million or whatever. It's going to flow through. So the whole point of this is we can play with your expectations of where you've been, your growth rates based on what input you're getting back or what you see, But at the end of the day, we have to come up with an expense number that acknowledges what's in it and what's not in it.
Right, so we just, so I'm just gonna say, like Congress, for example, there's certain mandates for funding, right?
Yes.
Certain expenses. And so now we get into a discipline that says, okay, we actually are gonna set aside $250,000, $500,000 for the next 5 years and extending. And so it's more of a policy that we're saying that we will say minimums or maximums, take your pick, whatever you want to do. Are we getting into that type of language that says that, no, we're committed to this, but we're not obligated? In other words, we're laying this out from a planning perspective, but that doesn't, I want to make sure I know what we're saying here.
Yeah, you're committed, so what I see it is you're committed to acknowledging and planning. It doesn't material, so, this to me, right here, is, it gets in this sheet, this is a planning tool, but it really gets in here is if you commit to doing it. So if you want to put $500,000 a year
Yeah.
for the next 10 years in asset replacement, you certainly can, right? I mean, but is it a policy? Well, it can become a policy if you want it to become a policy, but this tool allows you to acknowledge that you've got to put some money in, or you're trying to put some money in.
All right, so look at defense, all right? Some of those, we would use public safety as our defense. Like, no, we need to put aside $500,000 to $1 million every year. Minimum, $500,000 is our lowest level of mandate. That every year, you will find a half, you know where I'm trying to go. I'm trying to mirror this, we're gonna lay this out, right? But what I'm hearing though is that there's a difference between commitment and Board of Commissioners when you come before us for approval every year. You see how I'm separating the two? In other words, we're committing to this, but I guess the true authorization and the appropriation only comes through the budgeting process, which is
But I would use this
Right.
to help facilitate.
or Mark would even use this to help facilitate his recommendations. If he knows that that is something that the board wants to see is pretty much, don't come to this board without a recommendation of $500,000 for sheriff vehicles. Because we're not gonna fund any less than, and that's just an example.
Right.
Then that would be where we would be able, and that's where I would wanna be more detailed here and put sheriff vehicles, so we know that that's what that $500,000 or whatever the dollar contributed to is for.
Right. Madam Chair, you see when I was saying the lowest level, recognizing every year we could change it, but just for our planning perspective, to your point, the county administrator and finance can use that as a tool. So that's communication between them.
So you have the ability to change right now, as of today, because it's not locked down. The county will always have the ability to put it in there, that you can change anything that has input. You can change those categories and make them as detailed as you want.
And there are some fixed assets or some capital, I guess I should say, capital in this base year that I'm gonna be moving down here just to kind of give you an idea of what the 2018 budget, like we know in public safety, we gave them over $1 million for vehicles. So this number's gonna drop to 33 million, and $1 million is gonna go down here. I just, for the sake of this model, I just kind of wanted to give y'all an idea.
Chairman, I just need.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
If I could just, I'm posing this question to both Jennifer and David. On your growth rates, I noticed they're pretty conservative, particularly the year 19 and 20. You know, the overall economists in the United States are predicting growth from 2.5 to 3%. And I noticed we still land on 1%. Is there any particular reason why that side of caution?
All that number was on top.
And I know we can't control that, I'm just asking.
Yeah, this is expenditure side, not the growth and the digest side.
Okay.
This is expenditure,
Okay.
and these were numbers, just me having fun on the keyboard. You can see 1,
Okay.
1, 3, and I added a
Okay.
3 here for just, you don't have to make them, I was showing that you can make them all the same, you can make them different,
Okay.
you can make them a negative,
Okay.
you can change each year, and it will cumulatively calculate.
Yeah, okay.
There's no rhyme, believe me, there's no rhyme or reason to what those numbers are. We hadn't given it any thought, but again, if you go back to the book that we gave you, back to 2009, you can see what the historical averages have been, right? So now you have a basis for
Yeah.
saying, okay, in the last 4 years, it's been 1.5%. We gave you the data in the book, so you have a reference point to say, well, why would that number be 5? It's never been 5%, right,
Right.
historically. So that's what the whole purpose of giving you the historic, because it doesn't matter, you know, without the historical data,
It wouldn't-
you know, data is memory with no history,
yeah.
right? That's basically what we try to provide you is with history.
So that's the expenditure tab.
Mhm.
And then. Big enough? Is that good enough? This next spreadsheet is looking at revenues. We've looked at the expenditure side, now we look at the coverage factor. Right now, we've kept the coverage factor at 1. For every dollar we get in, $1 is spent. So again, this is a calculation based upon the expenditures of, on the previous slide of 90.2, then we need to have revenues of 90.2.
So if you determine in the expense function, the model set up such that you categorized everything, you truly captured everything, you need $90 million to cover it. Then the question is, well, where am I gonna get the $90 million from? Well, we know historically that about 49%, at least in the last three years, 49% of your money's come from property taxes. The balance of it have come from local option sales tax, just no different than what she found. She used those categories, so the model allows you to effectively play with the percentages of where the money comes from.
With the exception of general property
Right.
tax. You
So-
want to input each of these categories, and then whatever 100 minus these 4 categories are is what's going to be plugging into your general property tax.
You don't have many sources of revenue. You've got property taxes and everything else.
Nothing like hospital.
Right, and so whatever doesn't get captured in local option sales tax, whatever doesn't get captured in motor vehicle, home, or other tax revenues, literally is gonna default back to the property. You have no other source that I'm aware of. So assuming that this is what's gonna probably change the most, which are your property taxes, this model, based on these allocations, this model tells us then that you're gonna need to come up with about $44 million in general property tax to meet that allocation for that budget, assuming the rest of it works out as is. So now that we know you need now that we know, again, the local option sales and use tax, I think, is out of your control.
Right.
Mhm.
The motor vehicle and mobile home, in control or out of control. It's not in your control. The other tax revenues are, is it permitting? What are those other?
It's intangible tax,
Intangible
real estate
tax.
transfer tax.
Not really in your control. The other general fund revenues, do you remember, I can't remember
All the
exactly.
user fees.
User fees, some of those are in your control, but they're not gonna be 42% of your budget. So the only thing that you really have full control over is the 43 million. So the next step in the spreadsheet is to go from, okay, now I realize I need $43 million in tax revenue, property tax revenue, to make these numbers work based on what we agreed that we were gonna spend.
So there's the 49%. And what we do, again, you see the REF, that means it's referencing
Yep.
something prior. Input is where you input the information from prior year property tax billing, prior year millage rate. It calculates the prior year value of a mill. Then you have the input of projected growth rate. Madam Chair, I believe that's the rate you were talking about. And again, just for the sake of keeping it consistent with the 2018 budget, I put 2% on every year, just except for 2020. And the reason I said 5%, and again, we don't really know what that percent is just to show you that it can be a different percent. Plus, I knew that was when Switch was going to be coming on. You can also, so it gives you the property, projected property tax billing, that's a calculated amount, column or cell. And then the input, you can put in your collection rate. And, you know, right now with the economy being good, we're, you know, hitting a, 96.5% to 97% collection rate. So then, next, and again, these are all just they're not set numbers, you know, we still got some tweaking to do. But we did want to show you some minuses, some pluses, so you can see how this spreadsheet works. So in 2019, it would be that the projected property tax revenue would be under the projected required by 1.22 million. Okay, just by using the assumptions here. We show the projected value of a meal is 3.9 million. What you would need to come up with to get the 1.22 is 0.31 mils. Or it shows you your summary of fund balance position. You put in, we have our fund balance at 12.4.
Let me stop you.
Okay.
So after you figure out whether or not you have either a surplus or, for lack of better terms, a shortfall, you don't have two choices to get the money. You could raise property taxes, assuming that you keep the expenses the same. You could raise property taxes. In this model, you go back and cut the expense, raise property taxes, or what's the third? Fund balance. So the next steps that Jennifer and I came up with was, what does that look like if you exercise two of those options? To change the expense, you have to go back into the model and change an expense function. But the next couple of lines, Jennifer would have to go through
Yeah.
it.
So you would input your unassigned fund balance, which is currently 12.4, that is an accurate number, or close to accurate. Our required fund balance policy is 10% of our expenditures, so it calculates that. So it tells you how much quote-unquote excess that we have above and beyond our policy, which is almost 3.5 million. Then we wrote a formula in here that says, does the county meet fund balance policy? So let us know if the line that says required fund balance policy is always within our 10%. It would say yes all across. It would say no if we fell below that 10%. Okay? Then the impact of excess shortfall of revenues, again, this is just taking this number up here, putting it down here. Is fund balance needed? Again, if this is a minus, it's going to say yes. If it's not, if there's an excess like there are in the future years, it's going to say no. Total unassigned fund balance available, 12.4. If we used if we used 1.2 million of the 12.4 that we had, it'd be the remaining fund balance after the draw would be 11.1. And it also says, does the county meet its fund balance policy after this draw? And it would say yes if it still meets within the 10%, or it would say no if it falls below the 10%.
So there are a number of scenarios that come out of this, depending on if those numbers are positive or negative, how big the negative is and how big the positive is. These numbers are all going to continue to change, and they'll the interesting, so these numbers will continue to change depending on how big this negative or how big this positive is.
When it's
Cumulative.
performing a sensitivity analysis, each one of those key variables may drive it, may swing bigger or smaller, based on what I'm listening to.
Do me a favor, check, let me go back to the expense number. I was gonna say, we could, if you wanna change one of the numbers for them, you can, we can do it on this thing, or.
It's on the right hand side. On the keyboard,
Yeah, is it on the side?
on the right hand, I think.
In any case, I'm not, like I said, I wouldn't worry about it, but the model's been stress tested. What I did with our staff, with your staff, literally stress test this model, whether it was positive or negative, how big the negative was, what chain reaction it would have. We looked at it, if it got really, really bad, what it looked like, and, clearly, this is the third, back to the last.
No, I trust that
So-
part. I think, not to belabor, but my takeaway is, this is sort of like a macro tool, right? We're looking at a big picture, right? Because, to your point, if you come down to it, they teach us in Commissioner Training 101, the millage rate is the easiest decision tool. It's just,
Correct.
right? Takes no discipline, it's just make a decision, let's raise the millage rate, right? That's easy as a variable. The other ones, as far as using the general fund, do I burn my cash or do I cut expenses, right? Those are, right, so cutting expenses, you know, this tool, you can model the general fund impact, and you could, you know, meaning intuitively looking at this, I can look at the general fund, and I can look at the millage rate. But the expense part, which is the more deliberate, which is into county administrator's roles, you gotta go beneath those 7 functions of government that you typically list, Jennifer, right?
Yes.
To go deeper to figure out, okay, where do we really make the change? Just saying you go cut 10% or 5% or 2% across public safety, what does that really mean? You gotta go a little bit deeper, and so this is a feeder tool, but I'm sure this is not tied. I mean, you get where I'm going, this is just something that's for the board of commissioners, for the senior officials to use, but there's a piece beneath this that, Mark, this still doesn't, you know, forsake what you guys have always done, which
Yeah.
is to come up with a budget and.
Essentially, we have been doing, Jennifer's been doing most of this, it just hadn't been on one spreadsheet.
I'm just
So-
stating the obvious for Jennifer.
But yeah, the other process is still has to come into play.
The interesting thing about the public, you know, again, with the public works budget, we know since 2009 what that percentage has been. We know exactly, we know exactly what that growth looks like.
Yep.
So if somebody shows up and says $8 million, you know, at least you have the reference point of knowing that it's not inconsistent, or what they can say to you is something has radically changed within, maybe you took on a new service, right? You know, these numbers are clearly, you're gonna have to get behind these numbers at some point in time. But when they show up, it should be the number, right, it should be the number that, you know, all this tool is, once you go behind these numbers, then the question is, do we have any other non-recurring expenditures that have to be included in the process? Right, so when you go out and you're debating the millage rate, or you're debating cutting expenses, or you're debating going to general fund, you really have a you're on full disclosure what the expenses are. So if you have a fire station, you know you need 20 more people in, that number's gotta be in here. Right, so at least when you debate the general fund, whether you're gonna raise property taxes, it's with an acknowledgement that, you know, what that funding's gonna look like over a period of time. It is a macro tool, it's designed to assist the budget process, you know, given sort of historical trends, growth rates on the digest, growth rates and expenses, you know, public safety, you know, it is what it is, it's not, you know, probably not gonna go down. I don't expect any of these numbers necessarily to be negative. Some of them may fairly well be zero, but they're not gonna be negative, unless you get rid of a function.
Yeah, but I think what I like best about this macro effect, it gives us an idea, because what it's doing is getting better over time, and I see that, the trend as it's progressing, and then it just seems like in 2020, again, I know you've already calculated the switch, so that gives us that.
And that was just a swag.
Yeah, just a swag, so that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, it's in there, and then 2019, and believe it or not, this $1.2 million is relatively low in terms of going into the fund balance that what we've done in previous years, 5 million, 4 million, and so this 1.2, you know, of course, as we
You know,
dance around the top.
these are all sample numbers, I
increasing
remind you, these are all,
Yeah, I'm just saying numbers,
Yeah,
it feels considerably better than previous years. It looks like it's still just on the cusp of maybe having to tap in it maybe one more time, and then as we get those big pockets of money from our prospective people coming in, I won't call names, but we're excited
so
about that.
we know that 95 cents out of every dollar
Yeah,
since 2009 is spent.
yes,
Running on a nickel.
yeah, on the nickel.
We're running
We
on
can
a nickel.
finally,
This is trying to get you away from running on a nickel, so that you
Yeah.
truly acknowledge what your expenses are
Right.
and develop a budget based on what those expenses are.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, so it.
And that you don't overstrip the growth. I mean, I think to a certain extent, you could spend and be spending, and even with the growth going naturally, or organic growth,
Right here.
if you're just so expense-minded or not expense-minded, you could be growing, and so there's it's in a fair way we gotta get to. This tool will help us get right there, and you're deliberately guiding us financially where we can go, without getting into choppy waters.
I
All right, well, guys, I don't want to belabor this. Is there anything else y'all want to cover regarding this right now?
I think that's it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, just to finalize, we will continue to tweak this model as we go along. I mean, some of these inputs are gonna change. The formulas are pretty much, this is 98% complete.
Yes, okay.
We just haven't locked down the formulas because we trust that, you know, we trust that we're gonna keep a master copy in our vault, in the cloud, so that just in case
Intern
somebody
gets hold of
comes
it, or I
along.
get hold of it, yeah. Well, but to that point, so just to bring this full circle as a statement of work, because you guys were engaged, Director Hallman, this obviously needs to go to the full board of commissioners. They need to also, because some of the questions that were answered here were brought out by the full board of commissioners. What are your next steps?
What we'd like to do is, David and I would like to sit with you, Commissioner Robinson, and kind of get a little bit more of one-on-one input regarding this model before, excuse me, before the next meeting, just because you had some
Before
input.
the finance committee or the board of commissioners?
Board of Commissioner meeting.
Okay, all right.
So within the next 2 weeks, if you could look at your calendar and David would look at his calendar, we could just, I don't expect it to be long, maybe just a good hour or so, just to kind of go over it and make sure it hits the points you wanted it to hit with Madam Chair.
I'd like to make one more reference, is that we send you this model, because what the beauty of it is, I'd like for people to play with it. You can't mess it up, because we have the master copy, just to play with it, and I want you to find an error. All right, that's kind of what I want people to do, find where it doesn't work,
Right.
all right, or doesn't answer a question for you, and, again, we think it's covered about 99, it can always, apps get updated on the iPhone about every 6 months. It wouldn't surprise me if we have to update this at some point.
No, and now we would expect that. I mean, obviously, it should evolve, and as Jennifer, I mean, it should be custom to us, in essence, and she should have some flexibility, over time. And we're sensitive to your body of work, intellectual property, helping us create this. I can meet with you guys, I'm sure I'll work with them, just as a courtesy before it comes before you and the full board of commissioners. I'll commit to that. I think, and again, I have no problem with people using it. There's a difference where I'm a super user versus maybe my peer set may not, and so there's an instruction set, there's some wrapping. If you were to send this out in the email to the full board of commissioners, I mean, don't get in there, but I don't want them to be frustrated in the sense they got in there and they thought it was, we're sitting here as financial people and we're thinking this is so wonderful and it's easy. I mean, how did you not know that you weren't supposed to put a zero in it? I mean, you get my point.
Yeah, well, I agree, and it's not a consumer product.
Right, okay. So,
And
to
so,
that point,
being that if we could meet and then we would be presented to the board the next commission meeting, the first one in March. Both the model as well as this document here,
to close it out.
close it out.
So this full deck, so we'll have full copies, don't
Yes,
give them both, but make sure they have a bound copy
Yes.
that they get, how we are. Madam Chair, is that acceptable to come back before you, the full board of commissioners at the next agenda?
Yes, please.
All right.
Thank you.
We're good. We'll
I
go from
feel
there.
like the progression, essentially, it's getting, because if you have another, they're going in reverse, I thought.
But-
It's
but-
looking good.
I want to acknowledge, well done, this is what I was expecting. I mean, I know what I was looking at, and it's like, ooh, I can't wait. That's why I was like, okay, we're
You're
good.
excited.
Because, I mean, but even having this dialogue, there's some real decisions that are coming before us, that lays out at least the next 3 to 5 years. Like, okay, let's lay it on the table, guys, let's look at this, and now our next budget process will become more meaningful, appropriations, because now it's gonna get good. I think it probably gonna take time, and so what I heard you say is that we have a framework for policy, but you're saying don't box yourselves, we're here if we need you guys, is that?
All right.
Yes.
It's no different than home budgeting, and resource is a dynamic process, right? It's not done in a vacuum. None of us certainly like surprises, so part of it is internally here, people have gotta be willing to come to the table and talk about what they need or what their initiatives are.
Which I think Mark has done a great job. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the issue. It's like, we needed the macro view. For the Board of Commissioners to really have a conversation, I'm sure. and I think to that point, and I'll close with this last point, we'll let you guys go, is that, when did we go to, New York? Was it March or April?
Cold.
March 13th.
March 13th. All right, so here we are, we're coming, perfect timing, it's a year later. How do we, is this you guys who are underwriters, to give them a status on that we heard them, right? We listened, and that we've taken some actions regarding long-term capital planning process, and how do we report that back?
They will be contacting you, they have to by law do an annual review. So part of the annual review, they will contact Jennifer initially and send her questions in advance, and we will be ready to share this with them. So
Awesome.
what would happen is, if you pass a resolution or something, we would like to say, hey, Board of Commissioners passed a resolution and setting this forth, so they should be contacting her within the next 30 to 90 days or something.
Maybe as an action item, once we adopt, before Board of Commissioners receives this, like, do we know that they deliver what we scheduled, then we pass a resolution of acknowledgement, whatever that is. I'll let you figure out.
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you so
time.
much.
Good work and great stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you for coming. Did you learn a lot?
Thank you very much. Very good. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen.
So, see y'all.
Okay,
See
sounds
y'all.
good.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Good to see you.
Shake your hand. Have a rest of your week. Okay. We keep going here. We've got, I think, one more item, which is our normal monthly review of our financial standing and update.
Yes.
How are we doing on time? We're doing okay, everybody?
Yes, 3:35.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right.
This is going to be the second preliminary as of December 31st report. The next report that you get next month will be the final unaudited report for December. January, we do mention in this report, but you'll see why we don't really make a formal report with January, because of almost a lot of things that are being accrued to December. So like we said, the first 60 days of 2018 are recorded in 2017 where appropriate, and that's probably about 97% of the transactions. So we'll start with the general fund, and we'll start with we wanted to show you the revenues actual were $81,848,415. The budget was $79 million. We received 103.55% of the budget. That's a good thing. We were over budget with revenues. What we did is we listed some revenues, or we listed revenues that exceeded the budget by $100,000. And again, revenues exceeding the budget is a good thing. We had real current property on digest exceeded the budget by $3.2 million, and that was primarily due to the 5.5% new growth in the digest. And we are looking around still 96 to 97% collection rate versus the 94.5% that we budgeted. The prior on digest, meaning that the prior collections were $329,000 more than they were. More than budgeted. The self-insurance retiree, our retiree healthcare used to be recorded in the healthcare fund, but due to accounting practices, we found out that they need to be recorded outside of the healthcare fund. They need to be recorded in the general fund. That your internal service fund for healthcare is only supposed to be for active employees. So the revenue that we budgeted for them, and that revenue is premiums that they pay, depending on how many years of service and what kind of insurance they have, then these are the premiums that the retirees pay on a monthly or quarterly basis. Personal, current, and intangible taxes were $174,000 more than budgeted. And remember, this is the amount that they exceeded. This is not the actual amount collected. TAVT true-up was $152,000 more than budgeted. State aid for projects was $150,000 more because we finally received funds from GDOT for that Whitestone culvert that we've been waiting for. Boarding fees, was $138,000 more, and it was driven by actual inmate housed. TAVT SPLOST is $137,000, exceeded the budget. Tree replacement fees, these were fees paid by developers that we don't know each year. We don't budget anything. They go in a separate bank account anyway. We collected almost $120,000. Revenues from local governments was almost $120,000 more than budgeted. It was due to some inmate work crew revenue being about $85,000 more. Some school resource officers being a couple of $1,000 more than budgeted. We now build, Douglasville $15,000 for GIS services. That was an MOU that was agreed upon. And the City of Atlanta overtime reimbursement for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office of $8,349. We had the transfers in, as we've discussed, that was just the final 2010 SPLOST reimbursement, the excess from the old SPLOST coming into the general fund. We had surplus of sale of assets revenue, not included in the budget, of $115,000. And then we had some utility permits received but not budgeted for of $102,000, because those are kind of hit and miss every year. So overall, we had over $5 million revenue exceeded our budget. The next page, will show you the revenues that were under budget by $100,000. The federal government capital grant was under budget by almost $1 million, but that one is of no concern because these are grant funds, meaning they're reimbursable. We don't spend it, we don't get it. Therefore, you don't see it in the expenditure side, you're not gonna see it on the revenue side. Local option sales tax, this is one that, hopefully legislation will pass and make it where our online sales will be more accounted for and taxable, because we missed projections about $983,000. Personal current motor vehicle mobile home taxes, they were down by $123,000, but the revenue on the other side, which was the true-up, offset that, because they are inversely related. When you see the true-up go down, it's because the motor vehicles going, taxes are going. When you see the true-up go up, you see the motor vehicle taxes go down.
So it goes like a net.
Yes, the net effect is close to zero.
Okay.
Then Michelle reached out to the clerk regarding the clerk of Superior Court fines, state court fines, and jail surcharge. When you add up all of those are close to $600,000 under budget. And the response that she received from the clerk, and I believe the judges agreed, that the probation departments are not collecting as much in fines. The checks the clerk's office receives from state probation, which is for felonies, is down significantly. The accountability courts are not assessing as much in fines, and state court tickets are down a little over 2,000 tickets.
I could back up, all right, two separate things, so.
Okay.
But, yeah, accountability courts, and I'm just gonna go, how many people are in accountability courts? And then that'll be the first question I have. Between, you got mental health, and you got your drug DUI, I recognize there's a felony versus misdemeanor, I understand. Just look at some raw numbers, show us what those numbers are. Because if I understood, like for mental health, that went somewhere from 5 during the pilot program to maybe the goal is 75. And I'm trying to say I'm trying to find where's the real variable that's causing it to be short, because that's not enough people in ticket wise to get me for that number, to come up that short. So where do we stand with probation collection? I mean, I'm thinking that's probably where I would want to really look at. Are the judges just sort of, I'm hearing two separate things. The judges are actually saying, I'm going to cut this from $100 to $75 for the sake of the conversation, or is it, or is it that we're not collecting on the probation side when you've been sentenced and now I'm on probation and I'm not collecting? I'm hearing two separate things.
Michelle,
I know, this is almost a direct quote from Fannin County.
And some of it, I know some of it has to do with the indigents.
Mhm.
So as far as probation, we've been talking about that for a year or so. It's, there's issues.
There's no, you don't have to prove you're indigent.
Yeah, you
You're
don't
just
have to
saying
prove it.
indigent.
Can we find out the claim?
And then once a couple do it, it just keeps on, it's a domino effect.
Let's find what that real, is it really indigent? Is it really probation
It would
not
be-
collecting? Is it really accountability board?
Baker,
Barker.
Barker.
Are these state court tickets, are these traffic tickets or?
I'm assuming that there would be majority, traffic tickets.
So we're not giving enough tickets?
Yeah, they're down by a little over 2,000 tickets.
Is that a function of, we don't have enough sheriff deputies out there?
This would be
Or-
state court, so I'm assuming this would be GSP.
Georgia State Patrol, so there's not enough people on state highway? Well, that's not us. That has nothing to do with us. We're dependent on,
You get the revenue.
we get the revenue, but that ain't, we can't drive that. We can't put bodies out there to,
But it's not on GSP, right? Isn't it it's everybody? Is that right?
I would think if you got something within the county, you would go
Yeah.
with site court
Okay.
judge.
Yeah.
Let's find out, let's see if they can find out how much of it is at county versus state.
can we also ask Chief, I won't say necessarily Chief Sparks per se, but, Chief Connor is really what I wanna ask him. It says, because I know when we go through the fair play considerations, to put a new precinct out there, his comment was, well, I asked him, you know, it's really about cars that you need, or do you really need personnel? His comment, again, I quote, was that, well, no, we got enough, you can throw as many positions at us as you want to, Commissioner Robinson, but we can't find people to do this. I wanna get to the root of what this really is. Are people able, so, we're not giving tickets because we don't have enough people out there, but they, a function of the board of commissioners having done their job, which is fun, you know, hey, we'll give you the positions, you can't find qualified citizens to pass the drug or the background check, which is